Great. Okay, welcome everybody to a Rural Policy Learning Commons webinar today. My name is Michael Blatherwick. I work for the Rural Policy Learning Commons as a liaison officer for North America. Today's topic is Geographies of Immobility, Emotions and Human Rights of Latin American Seasonal Agricultural Workers in Quebec and their families. And our host today is Linamar Campos Flores. She is a PhD candidate in human geography by the University of Montreal. Her research project draws on the emotional geographies of cyclical agricultural labor migration with links with neoliberal policies and the possible violation of migrant workers' human rights. She's online here, and I'm happy for her to join me today. I have a couple small notes before the presentation. If anyone has any questions, you'll notice in the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A box. So even while Linamar is presenting, if a question pops into your mind, feel free to type your question into the Q&A box, and we will answer those questions after the presentation. And if you have any comments not related to a question, such as a technical concern, there's also a chat box at the bottom of the screen. So if it's not a formal question about the presentation, but you just want to ask a question or whatnot, I will also be monitoring the chat box as well. So the webinar materials, the PowerPoint presentation, and a recording of this session will be available later on our RPLC YouTube page. And for those people who have registered, I will send you that link once it is posted up on the website. And that includes also, we'll have PDF copies of the presentations made available. Just a reminder that today's platform we're using is zoom.us. It is a web-based program, and as web-based programs happen, sometimes technical interruptions of internet service may occur, especially if you're dialing in from a rural location. I know that it depends on the strength of your service. And even if one of us pops out, hopefully that won't happen today, but if it does, just hold on. Usually the program does reboot within 30 to a minute, and we will keep on going. So even if your internet service does kick out, not to panic, it should reboot. And also, like I mentioned, we are recording the session, so you will have an opportunity to view it later. So those are the things I have for the notes, and thank you again from the RPLC to turning in today, and I'll pass it over to Linamar Campos Flores.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to start thanking Philomena de Lima and Lydia Carvajal, our team leads, because it is those who invited me to share my research project today. I will start contextualizing the program. I will show the methodology I'm using in my research project. And after I present some figures and facts that I expect that serve to understand what I'm trying to do. And after, this is going to have two different aspects. The nationals, I'm going to present the numbers from Mexico, and after from Chiapas, where is the province where I'm working. And at the end, I will present some findings because I'm just finishing my field work. So there is not still a deep analysis, but I try to share what I'm noticing. And also because when I was doing my master's, I was working on the same topic, so I have a little more experience what's happening in this sense. The methodology I'm using is participant observation using the ethnographic critical approach. I did 30 semi-structured interviews with workers, 15 with Mexican workers and 15 with people from Guatemala, because I'm trying also to make a comparison to see if there are differences because of the terms of each contract. Also, 10 family members accepted to be interviewed. And I realized two focus groups. What's the program? First of all, I want to talk about the requirements for being a worker. Men, and I'm working especially with men. There are some scholars who are specializing women because there are very different, I will say, problems when we address one or other gender. Men should be married or be in a partnership, should have children, should be 24 to 48 years old, and be peasants. Another thing that I didn't write is that they cannot have more than 10 years of education. The majority I interviewed, they barely finished the primary school, the basics. They should stay, they should accept to sign a contract that will allow them to be until 8 months a year, from 6 weeks to 8 months. And all the Mexicans, they should be back the 15th of December. Before, they were different dates, but there was problems if they needed to renew the permit, the work permit. So the decision between governments was that if you go for 4 months or 6, 3, doesn't matter, your permit will finish until 15th of December, and you should be back in Mexico. The worker cannot break his contract except by an urgency. This means that when he is invited and he is trained, he's going to receive this information, that the questions he's going to answer, questions asking him, what will you do if this or that situation happens, because they want to be sure that the contract is over many things. Also, in the case, I'm talking about the case of Mexico now, it's they should pay 50% of his or their airplane ticket. In the case of the Guatemalans, they don't pay the ticket. The ticket is paid by the farmer. They should dwell wherever the employer decides, which it means that usually they are going to live inside the farmer's property. The worker cannot change of employer, except if he authorizes it. It means that there are many transfers between farmers, because sometimes the harvest will finish first, but there are new harvests coming, and they ask for the workers if they want to continue or go back home. So, many of them will accept to do that. Some, in my experience, they say, no, I don't want to do that, because there are, for example, some cultures like strawberries, and you need to be on your knees all the time. So many of them say, I don't like to do that. It's very hard, so I prefer to come back home. And one very important thing about the rights and related with citizenship is that they cannot apply for permanent residence nor citizenship, and their families should stay in the country of origin, which it means that they cannot be at the same time that the worker is in Canada. That's the guarantee that he's going to come back to Mexico or to Guatemala in any of the cases. Well, the program, the Canadian Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program, started with Mexico in 1974. And as you can see, there are a very steep ladder, I will say, very important growing every year. We started with 203 workers in 1974, and last year we had more than 21,000. All the rate, if I don't, I'm not exactly sure, but in the 80s, the women start going. The rate of women hasn't changed. They continue being only 3 to 4%. There are some studies which criticize a lot this gender bias in the case of hiring the workers, because it's proved that women are capable of doing any kind of activities, and there is not reason to let them out. And also, I will say, genderize the activities, because they are going to be sent to cultivate flowers, to do where the dexterity is needed, but not wherever, without taking into consideration the activity. So there are things that are being argued in that sense. Also, the treatment that women receive are still a little more, I will say, hard, because they are going to be treated like kids. They won't have permission to go out or receive visitors, and it will be very highly controlled in the places where they are living. They cannot receive visit from men, etc. So this part that you will see now, for me, it's the main aspects that I'm trying to analyze, because we are talking about absence from the home place. So here you see. Let me move my. I can see the segments of the age segments of these workers. As you can see, we start, the main proportion is between 26 years old. Here I'm talking about the year that we saw before, to 2013, where the 100%, it means this number. So as you can see, the main group is between 26 to 45 years. 73% of the workers are in that range. The important thing here is that is, as you know, the reproductive age. So they are leaving their places, they are leaving the communities when they are in their power of doing many things, and also when I will say, when you are more alive, you have all the strength to do and change and make plans, etc. So you are being moved from that. That doesn't mean, as you can see, that we have also people between 51 and 55 years old, and some percentage that's very, very small, but it means a certain amount of people, because those are the workers that have been working since the beginning of the program, of the first years of the program. The second figure that I have here is about the time spent in the program. I'm also taking as a reference this season, because I could find the data for this time. Here you can see that also the average of participation is almost the 70% of these workers have more than 6 years of participation in the program. And I'm using the data of the Ministry of Labor. They say that they have an average of 8.5 years of experience. I have had the possibility of interviewing 2 men that have been working more than, here one is 27 years. He started going 4 months each year, seasonally, and after, since, well, he has 18 years going 8 months a year, which it means that he's living more time outside the country, from his home, than inside the household. That it's the part that for me it's very important to keep in mind, because it will have effects, it will have consequences. Because I remember when I was talking about, I'm living in Sherbrooke in Quebec, and nearby there is a place where they are cultivating the Christmas trees. And I asked the guy, well, are you happy going? It's the time to go back. Are you happy? And I saw his face that it wasn't too keen about the question, say, well, or is difficult. And he said, yes, it is very difficult to go back because now I'm used to being here, doing by myself, and now I need to go back, and I don't know sometimes how to handle being at home. Specifically now, the numbers for Quebec, because I'm focusing my study in Quebec. Quebec started being included in the program in 1990. They started with 743 workers, and in 2014, as you can see, they received more than 9,000. A little less of half of those workers are Mexicans. Here's a very important dynamic, because in 2003, Guatemala and FERM, that's the organization who helps to, I will say, is like a kind of bridge between the farmers and the workers. They started an agreement with Guatemala. So people from Guatemala started replacing Mexican. Why? Because Mexicans started demanding for their rights. So they decided to open an agricultural branch inside a pilot program, so that allows Guatemalan workers to be working in the agricultural sector. But because of the conditions that are different, the farmers started asking for people from Guatemala, and also because they are more flexible, accepting the working conditions. So in this case, and I will talk about Chiapas, the workers, sorry, the this year, 2014, Chiapas sent a little more than 700 workers, and as you can see, 27% are staying 8 months. Here, I didn't write sorry, I thought that I did. The average, as you can see, most of the workers work from 4 to 8 months, with some peaks in some months, but now is a kind of norm. So it'd be interesting for the worker to go to Canada. So if we see this in percentage, we can see that these men stay 86% are staying out home between 4 to 8 months each year. And if we reduce the range, we will see that a little more than half, 55%, are going to Canada during 6 to 8 months. For me, that's very important data, because with that it means that they are absent of their household, of their homes, half of the year. And this half of the year, which that it means that it's always the same. It's a cycle. It's always the same time, which it means that they are going not to be present. For example, school ends in July, so they are not at the end of school. Here is very important, I think everywhere, but in Mexico is very important. Children have a participation, they do some dancing or things like that. They perform and they are expecting that their parents be there. Many of them are going to miss the birth of their kids, and the anniversary of the kids, the birthdays, the many activities, social activities that someone who is in Mexico will experience, will live. this bring me to the effects. The fact of being so long without and always only having the possibility to use the phone now, because I remember this man I was interviewing who started sorry in the program. They told me now it's very easy because you can phone or you can use internet or Skype or Facebook, any of those possibilities. But before, that was very, very difficult in our communities, because we are talking about rural communities. We didn't have a phone. We have only one sometimes that serve the entire population. So when we phone, we should wait that to ask the person who was answering, please go and tell my wife that I'm here. So he will phone, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later, and very fast because it was very expensive. And he told me, I received during the months I was in Canada, 2 letters, only 2 letters, because the time that it takes this go and come back from the mail post. So they said, he was telling me, I will cry every day. I will go to the fields, open the letter, I will read it, and I cry, because I couldn't have any kind of contact with my family. Now, one of the key persons I interviewed recently, he was telling me that the phone, it's a very special device, because he says they go back home, they prepare their food, and immediately they will go, most of them, they will go and start phoning home and spending all the time that this card, I guess that you know that there are some cards that we can use, we buy two, I remember it's $2.50 or $5, so they spend until the end each day, so they spend lots of money also doing this. First, if I refer to for the general aspect, most of them say that they are experiencing fear because they cannot be free to say what's happening, how they feel, how they are feeling treated. So many of them, they say that they are not appreciated, that they feel that they are being discriminated or racialized, putting aside, that's their perception. As in this same vein, they feel that they are being silenced. First of all, we need to remember that most of them, they don't speak English or nor French. Some are capable after some years of doing it, and they usually become the people in charge of some groups, or they have a better possibility of communication. They help others to communicate, working, I will say, playing the role of translators, helping when they go to the grocery to make groceries, etc. But generally speaking, they will depend on someone when they want to go to the doctor, go to the bank, go to make a transfer, etc. So will the older men in the program will help, because there is not programs in Canada to help in that sense. Also, there is something like I will call a paradox of invisibility. As I said before, they don't feel that they are being seen, that their job, their activities are being appreciated and recognized. But at the same time, they are very visible. if we see them, and I saw them each season nearby the supermarket I am used to go, so it's evident that they are not residents, because there are a group of men that are moving together, and you can see that they are not confident, and they go and they do the groceries and go to they are waiting to pay, and immediately they are going to go out, but you can see that it's a kind of discomfort. So you notice them, but when they are working, or their work they are doing, that for me it means to bring food to our tables, it's totally ignored. And the submission, because of this, the fact that each year the farmer have the right of nominate workers, so that allows, it's a kind of also have two sides, to nominate and say, I want to Jose to come back next year. The worker will look for this nomination, but that it means that he needs to be, in terms of many scholars, they said, a good worker. Good worker, which it means what? So they will accept the conditions, and we are talking about working an average of 10 hours a day that can go to 16 hours. I was surprised when I was listening that. So, and the conditions, Canadian workers will say no, because they know their rights, and because they say, don't, this is inhuman, I won't do that. But the Mexican and the Guatemalan workers that I have interviewed, they said, well, we came here to work, and we will work as much as we can. So as you can see, in one hand they will accept that, but in the other hand they will say, as you can read, that they consider us very hard, that is not just. They use a lot, I will need to work a lot in that sense, sadness and sad, which involves many kinds of meanings. About, they feel angry, they feel deception, they feel deceived, they feel rage, they feel injustice, and they will say sad. I'm sad, it's very sad, etc. That's the reason, because I underline that. They feel, as I said, that they are not recognized, but also, what can we do? We don't have jobs here, and if we have one, it's not well paid, and the effort is the same. And another important aspect is that they are doing this because they believe that in doing that, their children will have a very different future. Another highly documented in this case is alcoholism. In Canada, you can see them. I found when I was doing my master's, I exchanged, I will say, interviewed on the street, 2 or 3. They were really drunk, but they were freely talking about their feelings. There are cases in the small place where I went to do my fieldwork, drug addiction. Drugs are coming in, and I'm talking about cocaine. I'm talking about the soft drugs, I'll say, when one say that, because there is money. They know that they have money to pay for. Also, I found that there is gaming addiction. Some of them, they knew about casinos in Canada, so they started going to play, and after they go back home, and I was talking with a cousin of one of them, and he said, well, he has problems, and he's spending most of his money in doing that. There are many cases of depression, and generally speaking, I will say that after 1 week, we will know if the worker will stay or not, because he feel homesickness, and many of them go back. But some of them, I knew about a case, and he committed suicide because of depression, and many of them also, the people from the church who work, they were sharing with me that they repeatedly they share that they have suicidal thoughts. Referring specifically about the intermittent and prolonged paternal absence, I will say that we changed this figure, the one that you have, I don't know, your left or your right, with the father to the other, where the mothers are alone, being in charge of the family. And first of all, we are experiencing the separation of couples, which means that they are, many of them, divorced. Um, in one of the small communities where I was nearby, where I was doing my field work, there are many cases of women leaving their husbands and their children. We will say, we'll see a little later. Disintegration of the family nucleus is something that's it's very evident, and they talk, but they are not direct. They refer to many cases. Yes, do you remember this or that person who was going? I knew that, and they talk about that in that sense. There is a kind of uncertain situation for their children. They are experiencing also behavioral problems. There are many who, when they start becoming adolescents, they will start having a friendship with gangs, or becoming a small, going to the delinquents, because they don't feel that, in a kind of paradox, I would say, that the father is there. So it's a reaction. I was saying that women are abandoning their homes and children. There are at least 5 cases where they separate. When the worker came back, he didn't find his wife at home, but he found the children. The children was left with his family. That surprised a lot, because here, maternity in Mexico, it's very important. It's highly, I can say, we have an idea, we have a preconception about how the mothers should behave. So the fact to hear that they are leaving their children it's very surprising, but astonishing, I will say. And also, some of the impacts of being in this program could be that when they have problems and they are not working, or they are being sent back home, they won't have the possibility of honoring their debts, because they are in to go to work. They need to ask for, to lend money, to ask for money for some people, to ask for the owner of the convenience store to give food or things to their families. And if they cannot honor these debts, the stigma will be on women and children, that will start being treated in a very different way. And we need to remember that we are talking about a very small places where some thousands of inhabitants. And also, some researchers consider that this the program is not accomplishing one of the goals, because we will think that women will be empowered, because they need to be in charge of the household. But in many cases, it's this is not happening, because men will warranty that other men will take their place. So we can see that there is a preservation of the patriarchy structures, because women will continue under the um, sorry for the word, I don't find it. The responsibility that men will take. For example, I remember in one case in this small community, the woman where I was staying, she said to me, "Look, I have you seen three young women, and they are really good." She said to me, "They are really good wives. They stay all the time with their mother-in-law. They are not, we say in Spanish, locas, like if you are mad, if you are crazy, which means that you are not behaving as expected." And men, the uncle, the father-in-law, will go to school in taking the place of the husband, and the husband will, when he's phoning, he's deciding how and when the money is going to be used. So in reality, they are not being more empowered. And when I was asking some questions to these women, they will say, "Look, over the task I need to do every day, when he's not here, I should take theirs or his." So for me, it's not very nice that he's not here, because, for example, they have animals, they have cows, and she needs to go with the responsible, the cowboy say, "You need to do this and that," and but I need to go back home, and I need to be taking care of the children, etc. So for women are an additional task that they need to accept to be on charge. And also, I will see the other aspect. It's that many of men I interviewed, they recognize the role, the importance of the role that their wives are playing. They said, I know, because I need to be responsible of my cooking and my I need to do my laundry. All the activities, the chores that women are doing every day. They need to do it in the farms, so they suddenly open their eyes and say, it is not as easy as I suppose to prepare some eggs, for example. Say, I need to ask to my wife, how can I do? So food won't be boring, for example. So there is this positive aspect. And another one that I think that is one of the most important is that there are some modifications in the relationship between the father and children. In Mexico, it is not easy that the father show his affection for their children, and particularly in rural areas. So this distance is allowing that happens. They said, now I remember one of his, he was telling me that he feels that he was able to say in the phone, "I love you, I miss you, and I love you." And he says, "I don't know," because I asked, we were having a very easy, a fluid conversation, and he says, "I don't know if I have done the same thing if I have stayed in Mexico. I think that because I'm far from him, I'm capable of doing this." And also we can see that one of the motivations, a very important motivation about this coming, this back and forth, it's the fact that they are really doing this for the future of these children. Two men we found, and he said, one of them said, you could see the brightness in his eyes. "I'm so proud. My elder boy is finishing university, and he started working. He was referring the place, and my second one is starting the university education. So for him, that was like it was pain, the fact that being far away, and the opposite we can see with some of them, that when they were having problems, the kids were having a difficult behavior, they were feeling the powerless, because they say I cannot do anything. So there is this possibility of exchanges, of being happy in this situation, because this absence, this cyclical being and not being at home allows them to change, to open their lives to a different kind of relationship with their children. And to finish, there are still, I think, and other scholars will say the same, that there are unknown effects on the social tissue. We don't know still, because for me, also the question is, if in their families are being all these kinds of changes, what's happening in the community, when their communities, for example, where I was doing my field work, we are talking about a little more than 1,000 inhabitants. So, and 100 are going to Canada every year. So what's happening in the community, or the customs, the activities that they are missing, and also being missed, because the others say, if for example, Juan will be here, etc., etc. So I think that we need to continue studying this aspect to understand what's happening in the rural areas of Mexico. So I will thank your attention, and if you have questions, it will be my pleasure to answer.
Okay. So thank you, Linamar, for the presentation. I'll also introduce Philomena de Lima, who is the team lead of the RPLC migration team. And thank you, Philomena, for joining us. You're in Scotland, of course, today.
Yes, I am. And my apologies for being late, because you confused me by having 5 p.m. GMT on my...
Oh, yeah, it was minus 5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to refer to that wonderful website that is my Bible at the moment.
Yes. That's the fun part about, for those that are viewing. We have participants from all over the globe, as you can see, and so sometimes time changes and advertising time changes is of interest. And I think the -5 for anyone else who's in Europe who might have logged in late. And Zoom, when you set up a webinar in Zoom, it automatically does the conversion, and perhaps there was an error in that. But I saw that you were on right at 10 o'clock, so I know you caught all of Linamar's presentation, so thank you very much for coming in. For anyone who's viewing, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, feel free to type in a Q&A question in the Q&A box, and we'll forward those to Linamar. And I know maybe I'll even comment too, because Philomena, you did a webinar with us on European migration. And typically with migrant workers, are there any differences between what you see in Europe and what Linamar has kind of touched on today?
Well, I know I was going to, that's one of the things I was going to comment on. I think that just starting with the demographics, you know, particularly on the migration of Central and East Europeans that has happened since the European Union expanded into Central and Eastern Europe since 2004. The age range is very similar to what Linamar was talking about. I think the big, and we have similar conditions of work. I mean, you know, by and large, the Central and East European migrants that are employed in rural areas are employed in the low-paid agricultural, but other sectors, food processing and so on, tourism, but very seasonal and very precarious sectors. Okay, and they have very similar contracts where they will not have a year's contract, partly because I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the UK, if you're employed for a year, you start accumulating rights. You know, the situation is different between Mexican workers and Central and East European workers is because they have a right to be here. Yeah, because they don't come under any special programs because they are EU citizens. But the way in which employers deal with that is by giving them 10-month contracts at a time with a break. Okay, so you know that's it. It operates in a similar way, but there are different reasons for it. The other thing I would say is there is also a difference in terms of distance and travel, because it's much easier getting a flight from here to Krakow or whatever, because it's all within the European Union and you can get cheap flights. So, you know, people can come and go. So it's much more about the circular migration happening on much shorter timescales, if they can manage it. So, you know, there are certainly those issues. What I would say is that there's very little work and research done, although that's growing, that is showing the emotional aspects of such migration, which I thought what Linamar is doing is very interesting, and you know the consequences of that for bringing up children. What I do know, and because I convened a panel in Iceland recently on migration, where there was a presenter from Latvia, which is one of the Central and East European countries, and she talked about left behind children. So what's happening in some countries, and I'm aware anecdotally in Poland as well, that families are abandoning their children and coming and working in other parts of Europe. The assumption is that they're being looked after by grandparents. However, in the case of Latvia, a large proportion of them, in fact, the majority of them, were being left by themselves. And so the state has had to start developing some mechanisms to address this issue, which is put them in orphanages, okay? But, you know, when we're not there, at least in terms of the Central and East European migrants, in terms of understanding the emotional consequences of that, as far as I can see at the moment anyway. So you know, that's kind of, so there are many similarities and there are very many differences. There's much more work done with South Asian migrants and Europe, because that's happened over a longer period of time. And, you know, just thinking about on left behind children, but also particularly the point that Linamar makes, which, you know, the assumption always is that women who, or indeed men, because in the case of the Philippines, it's often men that are left behind, and the women who are migrants, because they're recruited as nurses. But particularly with women, that might be a source of freedom for them. You know, because women can exercise, they can become the head of the household. And it's often seen as liberating from what I see some of the literature in the UK. But it's really interesting getting the perspective of Linamar that says that actually it may not be liberating because the power is passed on to other men. And I'm not quite sure how much that's been explored in some of the UK literature. And I think that's very interesting.
Good, sure. Any comments there, Linamar?
Yes, in the last comment of Philomena's comment, I think that I did a presentation. I don't remember exactly. One of the conferences in the CHIAPAS is a francophone gathering of researchers, very important in Quebec, and talking about exactly about the difficulties of empowerment of these women, because there are two points of view. As you say, there are some researchers who are arguing that yes, there exists because, and they give the reasons, and it is true. We know that things doesn't have only one side or two. There are many, but when in the cases where I'm seeing here in Mexico, it's more the second situation. For example, in this small community, one of the women, she was telling to me, look, he goes and they have I don't remember, 40 or 50 cows, and I need to go and take care of them, and it is not easy. And but I have also two children. They are finishing the pre-university level, and I'm having problems with them because they cannot be there. It's very small, so they need to be sent very far. So I'm alone here doing all of this, and when he comes back, he says that those are his cows. That they have this discussion about the belonging, who belongs to what, belongs to who, and he said he doesn't recognize that if I won't do what I'm doing while he's not here, and the family, because this is another thing. Here in Mexico, most of the couples are married at common belongings. I don't know if the right word in English. So they share all the things that you do belong to both. But when it comes to that, so fights can start very seriously, because they say, oh, but I have been in Canada working very hard, and we are doing this or that because I'm sending money. But he's not thinking about all the effort that's being put in the other side to hold that all that, the property, etc., all the things, and the opposite. I remember one woman, she was like very, very shy, and she was almost like crying because she said, I don't feel very good because I'm feeling judged because they think that I'm not a good administrator of the money that my husband is sending, because she needed to, as I was saying, they should pay many of the debts. And we have the idea that they are really doing thousands of dollars. We forget, for example, that they are living in places, they are living in Canada, and they are paying dollars. They are not paying in Mexican pesos. So 30% more or less of their income is being left in the country where they are working, and the rest, they have many things, and there's very little. The average of each Mexican worker is around between $5,000 and $7,000. That is not enough to pay all the period where he doesn't have very frequently, he doesn't have a good job. The jobs here are one day yes, another not, and they are receiving, I'll try to make the conversion, $10 a day. So he says, if I don't do anything, I don't have that, but if I go and I do that, it's not enough. So that's another idea that it's very spread between, I think, among Canadians or wherever they are, that they are really doing lots of money. Yes, if we think in terms of the exchange rate, but if you divide all that in the months that he's not working, that's not a lot. And another thing that I haven't referred there, it's about retirement. They come because you were saying that also, Philomena. They go and they work, and because each year the period, the span time is going to be broke. They will receive at the end of 20 or more years around $60 a month. So someone said, what? I'm doing all of that, and I'm going to receive that very small amount is because they don't have a full-time job. So that's another thing that is not being said to the public. Say, well, you know, it means this and that. So the ideas that they have is that really they are job takers. They are taking the jobs. What it is true is that we are using them. They are receiving this. Yes, there is an exchange, but it's not, as is being said. And going back to this situation of women in their places, they are doing a job that is not being paid also.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, no, I think that's that is a really important point. And also the point that you made, which I think, operates in many societies now, is the point that, well, the Mexican workers started to get to know their rights, and started not putting up with it. So then what they do is, what the companies do is they seek the next cheapest source of labor, which is in Guatemala. And, you can see that happening all around the world, really, where, people just move their recruiting operations, or they move their work operations. You can't do that with agriculture, but with other things. So they move it to the cheapest place. So one of the things I was thinking, it sort of moves away slightly from what you're saying, but the extent, to some extent, so some of these things are circumscribed by legislation and by governments and so on. But one of the things other things that occurs to me, particularly, well, in all sectors, but in the agricultural sector, it comes across very strongly, because there's a very strong drive for cheap food, feeding the world and having cheap food. And to some extent, the price of producing cheap food comes at the cost of the exploitation of labor and reducing the labor. And so, it's not just governments and employers that are involved in the exploitation of migrant labor, if you like, in the context of, say, agriculture and the produce that they produce. It's also people as consumers.
Yes. I remember in that sense, François Crépeau. He's a very recognized lawyer in Quebec. He is working, I think, in the UN about human rights, and he was giving a conference and about this situation about the temporary foreign workers, and he said, look, if we take only Canadians, or if we will be paying the right amount for this job, the price of strawberries in Quebec will be 3 times the amount, because that will be the right price. If we are being just in that sense, so it will be very difficult, because as you are right, we don't think first who is producing our food. I insist a lot when I'm doing a conference, say, please feel at least a little of respect, because if he doesn't bend his back, we don't have anything on the food, on the table to eat. So we say thank you. And the second thing is, we want all the time these good prices, and we don't think about really how much it costs to bring this food to our table. So you are right in that sense.
I do think that in a way it's an important issue, because as long as we don't address, all of these factors together, we're going to, the whole sort of argument for having migrant labor as a necessity, because I'm not sure, I'm not saying that we don't need migrant labor, but, it's never really challenged, because the assumption is, well, either local people don't want to do the job. Of course they don't want to do the job, because it's not paid enough. And, you know, and then at the same time, and I mention this because it's very much relevant in the UK at the moment, because we have the referendum next week on whether we should stay in the European Union or not. And the biggest issue that's being put on that the media is highlighting is immigration. And you know, the people who want to leave are basing their sole argument on the fact that if we left the EU, we would not get all these EU citizens. They're not migrants. They have a right to be here. We will not need to have them here. And then, of course, there will be jobs for local people. But, you know, so, you know, my point is, I suppose that both local people and migrants are affected by very similar globalization processes, you know, that are sort of restructuring the market and casualizing work. And migrants and people who are looking for jobs supposedly that they don't want to take because it's not paid enough are pitted against each other, you know, whereas they're both experiencing some very common experiences which are at a global level, you know, in some ways. And I think that plays itself out, you know, most starkly for me in the agricultural sector because of the heavy reliance on special programs to bring migrants in. And it's a basic necessity that we all live on. You know, we all need food. And yet we're prepared not to, you know, kind of bring that element of consumer power, if you like, you know, to look at this. And, you know, which has an emotional cost in terms of either left behind children or the issues that you mentioned in terms of the emotional costs that you talk about in Mexico, you know?
Yes, I think that I really expect that this approach I have taken, it will help. There are many studies made with women who take care of children, elder people, and the effects, especially women coming from Filipinas. And one of the aspects, I remember you were referring to these people in Poland, the kids now are, the government needs to do something. But there are lots of in these cases where I was reading that when they are being left to the grandparents, first, the big discussion was the grandparents, but they should be resting. They did their share with their own children. The abuse that can produce, because the money, it's used also as a kind of, it has lots of emotions tied with. They send it as a kind of gift. Say, I'm going to give you this or that because you are behaving good, but also we can use it to punish. So they were playing with that, and some of the grandparents, they were complaining about this. I don't know, I need to do this because if I don't do it, my daughter or my son isn't going to send the same amount, and I'm being on in charge of these kids, and their needs continue being the same or more. That's one of the things. The other aspect that, and I remember, is always about what's happening with children, and because this the global chain replacement that Hochschild it's arguing about, telling that another women will come to replace that women that go, so we go like that. But when we are talking about men, we don't know what's happening. Who is replacing? Because we are just, especially, I'm referring to this belief in Mexico that men are not there. They are there, but they are not. But you can see that when they go, they are not in their homes. It's a huge adjustment that needs to be done also, because they have very, very specific activities and functions that when he's not there, the women need to fill in and say, oh, I don't know. I remember reading a friend's research in Yucatan, and women, one said he was very surprised or impacted for this sharing. He said, I only want one day for myself, because she was really overwhelmed with all the activities that she needed to do. So I think that we need really to see first in the case of Mexican and Guatemalans as people, men. Here we have this saying that men don't cry, they don't feel, they shouldn't express their feelings because that's not a man thing. So, but when I have had the possibility of working with a psychologist, they cry a lot. And they say, this is for my children. I am doing that because I love them. So it's a kind of contradiction. So for me, it's very important that we can do first to accept that emotion matters, first of all, and the men have their emotions that are moving, are being a huge motivation that is not being recognized in our research work.
That's good. I was wondering if Philomena, perhaps we should wrap this up. Is that okay with Linamar and Philomena?
Yeah, that's absolutely. Can I just make one comment before we go? Because it kept coming back to my mind, and I'm just thinking that there might be some interesting research, and Linamar is more likely to know about it than I do. I know that's been taking place in Canada around, men who go to work in the oil industry, the tar sands. Particularly, I think there's work maybe in Labrador and Newfoundland, where they've been looking at men leaving the communities to go and work in the oil industry, and then and leaving their wives behind. And from the conversation, a very brief conversation where we had a Zoom, a video conference meeting, it seems like there were some very interesting issues that would be quite good to connect with. Linamar, I was because they were looking at those sorts of things about how women felt in the community, and it reminded me the whole thing about stigmatization and so on. I think what's maybe different about the men in the oil industry, and we have them up in Scotland as well, where they're away to places like Congo and Angola, and for 3 weeks on, 3 weeks home, and so on, is that there is, I think there might be literature on them, but I mean, it seems like the one thing that's different from the Mexican workers and from the workers that are working in the rural industries is they're very well paid, and they because they're offshore, they don't pay tax. So that, and they actually may not be that well educated. I mean, I know of people who have virtually no qualifications, but will be doing dangerous jobs like abseiling, or abseiling down into the depths of the oil rig or whatever. And they left school without any qualifications, but they're paid tons of money. So it's an interesting, similar sorts of things, but slightly different context. And that's been a pretty worldwide phenomena, really. And it would be interesting to see if there's any literature on that, because a world of its own, really, as well.
A couple of things. I think there was some observations on alcoholism rates and stuff like that in the Alberta tar sands and stuff like that. Of course, the price of oil has dropped as recently, and there's been a little bit of cease of production of late, but I know that about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of looks at the impacts of, like you say, the family structure, which is something that I appreciate out of Linamar's presentation here, because often you know, policymakers sometimes might look at the economic impacts, but you know, the social effects of these programs sometimes aren't researched and looked at. So I think what you're doing, Linamar, is fantastic, and I really enjoyed the presentation today too. Do you have another last comment that you'd like to add, Linamar?
Well, only to thank this possibility, because I learned a lot listening the comments and sharing, and I really, for me, it was great, the exchange. So I have the possibility to share this, especially because I'm finishing my field work. So allows me to put things in place, you know, so to understand what's happening and decide my analysis where it's going to be, and all of that. So thanks a lot for this possibility. Thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just make a couple. Oh, go ahead. Did you say something, Philomena?
I just said, well done.
Yeah, great. I'll have just a couple comments here. So for those that are watching, I will send the link once this video is posted to YouTube. And we do have a webinar coming up next week, which is on planning for climate change. So if anyone is interested, please send me an RSVP. The email is on your screen there, blatherwickem@brandonu.ca. And another thing we have coming up in the fall in October is the CRRF RPLC conference in Guelph. CERF here in Canada is the Canadian Rural Revitalization Foundation, and the Rural Policy Learning Commons are bringing together a conference. It's going to happen in Guelph, Ontario in October. It's going to have participants from all across the world on rural issues. So again, if you're interested in information on that, feel free to email myself, blatherwickem@brandonu.ca. For more information on the RPLC, please visit our website, rplc-capr.ca. We have a lot of different research theme teams, and the whole purpose of the RPLC is an international network of institutions to help support the development of rural policy. On the website, you can also sign up for our email list, find out more information about research and news, and more webinars, which we have planned in the future. So thanks again to Philomena de Lima, our team host for the migration team, and of course our presenter, Linamar Campos Flores. Thank you very much for your time today and for sharing your research with our network.
Sure. Have a nice day.
Great.
Thanks.
Take care.
You too.